Jr. represents two of the greatest extremes of the human mind, a Nobel Prize-winning mathematician and a long-time victim of schizophrenia. As a graduate student in 1950 at Princeton University, Nash helped pioneer an entirely new field of mathematics called game theory. His groundbreaking ideas are at the root of modern economic theory. But it would take over 40 years before Nash was rewarded the Nobel Prize in Economics for that very theory. 40 years because, in 1959, at the age of 30, his remarkable mind short-circuited, and John Nash Jr. was hospitalized against his will for schizophrenia.
The first time I was taken to the McLean, which is a very highly rated hospital, there were policemen. I struggled with them a little at the doorway. But resistance was futile, and we realized I'd been captured like a chess man on a chessboard.
For the next 30 years, Nash's life swung back and forth, from the depths of insanity to the heights of intellectual reasoning, from homelessness in the streets of Europe to an honorary position at Princeton. His brain was subjected to insulin treatment, electroshock, high doses of medication. And still today, Dr. Nash is in a constant struggle between irrational and rational thinking.
So ultimately, I managed to get beyond hospitalization, but without actually being sane. But it, in a sense, was a sort of forced lucidity. I was forced to accept normal thinking. So when I returned to the delusional thing, I felt like I was escaping from having been under thought police that were forcing me to behave normally.
Your sister?
John Nash had two sons before he developed schizophrenia. Nash has passed on both his genius and his schizophrenia to his younger son, Johnny. Dr. Nancy Andreasen has come to meet with Nash, his wife Alicia, and their son as she pursues her research in the links between creativity and mental illness.
So, you're a psychiatrist?
I'm a psychiatrist, yeah.
What's your name?
My name's Nancy.
Nancy.
Andreasen is last name.
I see.
I'd like to talk to you, a little bit about what you were interested in when you were growing up. Your experiences playing chess.
Okay, just leave me with questions. I'll try to answer them.
Okay. When you first started having symptoms, as we would say.
I was in my teens.
You were in your teens.
I was a born-again Christian. I was a fanatic. I was a religious fanatic. And the voices I heard, I interpreted them all as God,
What kinds of things did the voices say?
I walked out into the middle of the highway, and they wanted me to stand there in the middle of the highway. That sort of thing, pretty severe.
Pretty severe.
Yes. Yeah. I didn't realize that my father had passed on anything to me. I was just caught by surprise. Yeah. I was not savvy like you psychiatrists who know that sort of thing runs in the family. Instead, I was completely caught by surprise. I was flipped out at the time. I had given up my chess and my math. But I didn't really suspect that I was headed for a mental hospital.
So you were in your teens, but you also managed to recover enough so that you were able to go back and eventually get a PhD in math.
Well, that's a remarkable thing, that during my religious insanity, I lost all ability to do mathematics. I had been a mathematical genius, 800 on the essay, on the achievement test. But I lost all ability to do mathematics. I couldn't add a column of numbers. But then I went back to school, the voices disappeared, and I took up math again. And I regained all my mathematical, all the mathematical ability that I had lost. And I went on to get a PhD, yes. I published and I taught, yeah. I followed in my father's footsteps, to do honor to my father,
Yeah. And
Johnny Nash, like his father, often experienced periods where he was able to regain his full intellectual capacity. But the psychosis would always reoccur, making life a roller coaster between insanity and lucidity.
But I'm still suffering, the symptoms of mental illness. You know, I hallucinate, I still hallucinate, you know, but I can function. I function despite the mental illness, functioning schizophrenia.
When you mention hallucinations, what do you mean explicitly? You mean a voice, or what do you mean?
Both auditory and visual.
You see something?
Yes.
What do you
Didn't
see?
you know that I have visual hallucinations?
Well, you claimed it once in the hospital. I remember one time.
But Dad, you're not keeping up with me at all if you don't know that I have visual
You don't
hallucinations.
confess. Well, what is it? What is happening?
I have visual hallucinations,
What
Dad.
do you see?
I see things in the air that aren't there, you know.
How do you know? I mean, like ghostly figures or what? Like
Yeah, like ghosts, yeah.
shadows? You see shadows?
I see, you know, in the air.
So it must be shadows, right? What do you see in the air?
You could call them shadows. And he hasn't even kept up with me.
Well, you haven't said that
Well,
you
it's
see
real
something.
hard.
We don't see it. You have to tell us that you
Yeah.
see.
It's, you know, your parents are not your doctors, and so they don't want to intrude on your life.
That's too bad. Well, it's been a pleasure.
It's been very nice talking to you. Thanks very much.
Anger, withdrawal, isolation, denial. The symptoms of the disease and the reaction to them make treatment only more difficult.
It's rare that an individual who develops symptoms, gets diagnosed quickly, comes to treatment, and then is optimally treated for the remainder of their lives. More often, people are ignorant of what is happening to them. They really don't know. Or if they do have a sense, they don't want to say anything about it because it's a highly prejudicial and stigmatized thing to say, you know, I've got some mental disorder.
Denial is often the first reaction to the onset of schizophrenia, but it is far from the worst. Patrick's son, Gainel, was a healthy teenager of 15 when he quit high school. He told his father he quit because he thought he smelled bad. Patrick didn't think much of it until the following summer.
He left school in April, and the next summer, one day I had him on the telephone, and he was in total delirium. He was saying incredible things. That was at the time of the Olympic Games in the United States, and he told me that people on television in Houston were talking to him, and they gave him the gold medal for chaos. And he told me that on the telephone. And that's when I realized that something real bad had happened. I never thought it was a real disease. Even if I knew it, I mean, rationally, but inside me, I thought it was gonna be okay one day. We just had to wait, and we just had to act normally. I mean, I told him, go back to school, go and see others. I mean, it's the only way that you can recover your old self is being with others and acting normally again and living normally again.
With antipsychotic medication, Gainel's psychosis started to improve. But despite the lucidity, his mind continued to be plagued by the symptoms of schizophrenia.
And he used to tell me, oh boy, I'm mad, I'm never gonna do it. And that made him very, very, very unhappy. That brought us to that day when I think he felt so bad and he was kind of depressed that he suddenly decided that he couldn't do it anymore. So he just said he was going out to the cafe to have a cup of coffee, and he went straight into the subway and under the train. And that was it.
On January 27th, 1998, Gainel ended his life. He was 19 years old. 50% of the young people suffering from schizophrenia will attempt suicide. 10% of them will succeed.
The sad part is that the longer a person remains actively symptomatic, the more time the disease has to progress, damage begins to accumulate in the brain, and the less responsive they are to treatment, and the poorer their prognosis becomes. There are some folks who are thinking about prevention, and their thesis is that if we start treating these young people with medication before the onset of the disease, that you have a high likelihood of preventing the downward effects of the disease in the brain before it actually manifests itself. So this is very controversial. You're medicating somebody for something that they don't have yet and perhaps never will have.
There is no cure for schizophrenia, but medication does help to attenuate the symptoms. And the earlier the patient is treated with medication, in general, the better the outcome. At the University of North Carolina, under the direction of Dr. Jeff Lieberman, scientists are working to identify and treat patients at the earliest signs of psychosis. Dr. Diana Perkins studies the brains of first episode patients, young people dealing with the symptoms for the first time. By closely monitoring their brain structures as the disease progresses, Dr. Perkins hopes to determine whether schizophrenic brain anomalies stem from birth or develop over time.
We're very interested in the earliest stages of the illness for many reasons. One, it will give us more information about what may cause schizophrenia. And we also hope that by intervening early, we may even be able to prevent the onset of psychosis, the onset of the illness.
I was having some suicidal thoughts, and what brought me into the hospital originally this last time was I thought I could fly.
Teresa is one of the first episode patients who has come to Dr. Perkins looking for answers.
There was a meteor shower, and when the stars fall from the sky, I always thought that meant a soul was going up to God or something. And so I started believing that maybe my soul was going to be going up to God.
Teresa already knows schizophrenia all too well. Her mother was a victim.
You know, I was afraid I was going to get schizophrenia. That's actually one of my biggest fears, was kind of developing that into that. And so I tried everything to not look at that, but in the process of me not looking at it, I guess it was progressing. It didn't go away, and I kept having symptoms.
Although half of the patients who suffer basic symptoms will never experience them again, the other half may be on the road to full-blown psychosis.
What we're hypothesizing is that the people that continue to develop symptoms or they continue to worsen may have some changes in these brain structures. So with Teresa, what we're going to look at is whether or not there are these changes, and does the brain change over time?
Okay, so how does my brain look?
Yeah, it looks good, Teresa. These are pictures of your brain that are taken this way through your head. We call them axial slices. This MRI looks very normal. There are no obvious abnormalities. The ventricular sizes are what you would expect in a normal healthy person's brain.
I've never looked at my brain before, so I'm just trying to figure out maybe where my intuition is, or where when I dream, or all those things.
For the moment, Teresa's preventive treatment seems effective. As long as she continues with medication, the symptoms may not recur. But will Teresa remain committed to a lifetime course of powerful antipsychotic medications based on a single schizophrenic episode?
My hope is to help Teresa control the symptoms, and when she's all better, prevent relapses in the future. But we don't know how long people should stay on medication, and it's tough to commit to lifelong medication with just one episode. That's the kind of thing that Teresa and I will be talking about over time.
How I see my future today. Well, that's kind of a hard question for me to answer because I'm just taking this a day at a time, literally.
One day at a time, on the razor edge of paranoia and hallucination, day after day, until the day medical science breaks down the walls of madness.
I think we're getting better and better at treating schizophrenia, and now the majority of patients with schizophrenia live in the community and often are very well and may require only short admissions into hospital.
Considering from where we've come in terms of our knowledge of schizophrenia, we know a great deal now, but we're on the verge of knowing